Hi everyone, and welcome inside Mullet Arena for the Devil Source Postgame Show presented by Jones Auto Centers. Gabby Chernoff and Chris Cartwright here following number 5 Penn State sweep over number 14 ASU. Nittany Lions won 6-3 on Friday and by a score of 4-2 tonight on Saturday. Now, Chris, Greg Powers said at the outset of the season, this is the best, the deepest roster we've ever had because of the expansion into the CHL, and now some teams are dipping into the AHL, but he said because of that, every other team is just as good and just as deep as well, and Penn State was no exception to that. There was tons of national media, a bunch of headlines were being garnered all around this series, and that's because the consensus number 1 overall pick in next year's NHL draft, Gavin McKenna, was in the house making his collegiate debut, scored his first collegiate goal here tonight. It was the 3-2 game winner that iced this series for Penn State. Chris, I mean, we were watching a generational talent on the ice tonight. What did you kind of just make of the game as a whole, and especially with Gavin McKenna here?
I thought it was a bad idea for ASU student sections to be chanting overrated at him throughout the game because he was pretty clearly the most talented guy on the ice. No offense to Cullen Potter or anybody else. I just think that was a pretty rare and special type of a talent that we saw. ASU squandered a great opportunity tonight to be up a couple goals going into the third period and not be able to get that done. A really costly penalty that ASU took needlessly, set up the late power play, and Greg Powers said you can't have that happen. He called it inexcusable. He said it was a dumb mistake, and really it was. ASU only had a few penalties in the game. Also had gave up a shorthanded goal, which you can never do situation. This team played better tonight than last night. I didn't get to watch the third that much. I was at Moonlit Madness, but they played better. I felt like in the second period they really kind of found a rhythm and had a better flow after earlier in the game doing a poor job at moving the puck into the right places to be able to get higher quality shots. Penn State, as you said, super talented. I feel like this is a team that every bit as good as Western Michigan, which won the national championship last year, which we saw, and Denver, which won the national championship 2 years ago and is a physical team. ASU's increased its physicality, but you could tell that Penn State has more rhythm and continuity a little bit with more returning production from last year, and then McKenna's the guy who is the icing on top of that. You got to get points in this type of a situation, given the ASU leading and going into the third both nights, and they weren't able to get that done.
Yeah, this Penn State team went to the Frozen Four last year, returned 75% of its offense, including its top 6 scorers from last year. Brought in Gavin McKenna. They have 2 top 10 Hobie Baker finalists from last year as well, and a first-round pick from the 2025 NHL draft. But needless to say, ASU has a lot of returners as well, and Power said, it'd be really easy for me to stand in front of you guys and chalk it up to, these guys don't have a lot of experience in college hockey. This is a very new-look roster that we have, but at the end of the day, he said it's because of our veterans after last night, and Captain Kyle Smolin said the same thing. He said, we as captains need to step up, and the leadership group needs to step up as well. They kind of did that tonight. Bennett Shimmick, co-captain to Kyle Smolin, and then assistant captain Cruz Lucius, both scored both of ASU's goals tonight. Cruz Lucius, kind of a quieter season last year after being injured for most of it, and he looked very comfortable tonight. His stick handling looked very good, and then, like I said, he had the goal. It was kind of a backhand right on the short side of the net there. But just what did you make kind of ASU's veteran presence? And you mentioned the penalty as well that cost them the game.
Yeah, you could tell that they're trying to get a feel for playing with one another. Powers moved Cullen Potter down from the first line to the second line to play with 2 of the newcomers tonight. I think that they had better continuity throughout their lines, and they seemed, as this game wore on, to get more of a sense for one another. Early on, it was a lot of just the puck being around the perimeter, not swinging it left to right. Guys were leaking out prematurely. I thought that was, it was almost like they were playing individualized to some degree earlier in this game. And I was like, even though ASU had a 2-0 advantage, by the time that had happened, I thought Penn State had been playing as well or better. But then ASU really, I thought, got into a pretty good flow and got better shot quality for most of the second period. And really even into the third period, as you said there, I think some of these returning guys that ASU is going to be heavily reliant on, with a heavier contingent of freshmen on this team who haven't played college hockey at this level against this caliber of opponent. You're going to need those to get more out of those guys early on in the season, and Greg Powers did tonight. Cruz Lucius looked as good as I've seen him. You mentioned the injury last year. Shimmick is one of their better players, of course, and some of these new guys, I think, they've added a little bit more size, a little bit more of a physical presence, and I think that's going to give them more balance in their style of play as they get deeper into the season.
Yeah, and injuries is a big reason why Greg Powers went out in the offseason and said we need to kind of chalk up a little bit more of a physical team here this year. He said at the beginning of the season, his first press conference, I felt like we've been a little slight is the word he used the past couple years, and that's partially what makes you a little bit more prone to injury if you have smaller guys with a sport as physical as hockey. And I think he did a really nice job getting more physical presences in the offseason. Another thing to mention, 1 for 12 on the power play this weekend. ASU finished the regular season last year with the best power play in the country, so a very stark contrast to that. And then a new face in between the pipes this weekend for the Sun Devils, Connor Hasley, senior Bentley goaltender transfer. He led the NCAA in shutouts last year with 11, and Chris, you and I were talking. He was kind of standing on his head, and none of the goals really looked like they were his fault.
Hasley was really good. I mean, what I like about him is he's not frenetic. He's not kind of all over the place. He's very square to the shots. He covers shots when he needs to. That was an issue for ASU, giving up rebound, second chance opportunity goals last year. So I think this might have actually been an upgrade for them with their goaltender situation, even though they lost a transfer to North Dakota, right? And yeah, I mean, I do think that last year's play, they were a little bit too sort of random due to not having enough of a physicality to them. And this year, seeing in the NCHC some of the teams that they've gone up against, the Western Michigans, the Denvers, that have those bigger bodied presence guys on the D end, and you know, the ability to kind of control the puck a little bit better. That, I think, is what Greg Powers is trying to inject into this roster, and I was pretty impressed by the talent that he had assembled. I just think that they're a little bit further behind a team like Penn State in terms of having the cohesiveness and being on the same page.
And Greg Powers also mentioned that last year they didn't really start getting those quality wins that they needed until about the 10th or 11th game of the season. Now, a lot of that you can chalk up to them being so injured all year long. Literally, they did not have their full, complete, healthy roster for a single game last season. They came close, and then Benji Eckerly tore his Achilles in a pre-game sort of warm-up activity. But Chris, what do you think this being swept ASU this weekend means in terms of even looking so far ahead as the tournament?
Well, if ASU really becomes like one of the premier teams in the country, then it probably won't matter. But more likely, they're going to be like on or near that cut line of the NCAA tournament that we watched like for months last year, like that iceberg that you see coming, and you're trying to get around that into the postseason, and they weren't able to do it. And you hate to have a situation where you're looking back in 4 or 5 months from now at the missed opportunities and going, that was the one that they should have had, or that one, and definitely tonight and even last night they were missed opportunities to get points or get a win against a team that would have a lot of value in winning those games because of what Penn State's about to do this season, I'm sure. Last season, a little bit different, as you said. They had a lot of the injuries and whatnot, but it just dogged them the rest of the way. I feel like there's not a lot of non-conference opportunities to beat teams of this caliber. And then who knows what happens with the other NCHC teams and their non-conferences, and then how that affects the new updated version of what the metrics that they use to rank these teams, that then turns into who ends up in the NCAA tournament. So there's a lot of things that we don't know about. But again, if you're Greg Powers, you've got to be really frustrated to lose this one, especially after being up a couple of goals and playing probably as well or better than a great Penn State team.
Yeah, and last year that loss at the beginning of the season that really kind of got them what was against Air Force, which is a much lower caliber team than this Penn State team is. So we'll see how that fares out. NPI is the new college hockey system that they're using to rank everything and kind of determine the postseason. But ASU takes on another Big Ten team next Friday as they kick off the Icebreaker tournament. They're hosting it this year. They'll play Notre Dame in that first game. Quinnipiac and Alaska Fairbanks also coming to town. So until next weekend, Gabby Chernoff and Chris Cartman from Millett Arena for the Devil Source Postgame Show presented by Jones Auto Centers.